It was a Thursday night when it happened. Not a weekend, not some cliché Friday night affair under the guise of girls' night out. Just an average weekday, where she said she had to stay late at the office to help with inventory before their quarterly audit. Nothing suspicious, really. Vanessa's been working at that small chain furniture shop for years, and this was routine, something that happened every few months, so I didn't give it much thought when she left the house in that tin coat I bought her last Christmas and her hair tied back in a loose bun. She kissed me goodbye like she always did, and I barely looked up from my laptop when she walked out the door, just gave her a distracted, drive safe, and kept working. It wasn't until 2 hours later, when I realized I hadn't eaten anything and stepped outside to pick up some takeout, that I saw something that stopped me cold. Now, the place she works at is only about 10 minutes away, right near that coffee shop I used to frequent when I worked freelance before landing my remote gig. I parked in the lot across from the strip mall, not because I intended to snoop, but because I figured I'd grab a burger from the place nearby and surprise her with a coffee if she was still there. It wasn't a plan born out of suspicion, at least not consciously. Maybe something inside me was already stirring, but I didn't feel it yet. As I crossed the street with a coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, I glanced toward the furniture store just to see if the lights were still on, and that's when I saw her through the front window. She wasn't alone. There were no co-workers, no signs of inventory being sorted or shelves being stocked. Just her, standing close, too close, to a man I didn't recognize. He was taller than me, probably mid-30s, with that smug posture of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. They weren't touching, not then, but their body language screamed familiarity, the kind that doesn't grow from work emails and lunch breaks. She laughed at something he said, a real laugh, head tilted back and eyes locked on his. And when he reached out and tucked a piece of her hair behind her ear, she didn't pull away. That was enough. I didn't need anything else to know something was wrong. I stood there on the sidewalk like an idiot, coffee cooling in my hand, wondering if maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe she didn't even realize how close they were standing. Maybe, Eric? A voice called from behind me, and I turned to see Megan, the girl who used to do shifts with Vanessa before she transferred to the other location. She looked confused. "What are you doing out here?" "I was just grabbing food," I said, but I must have sounded off, because she tilted her head slightly like she was trying to read more than my words. Vanessa told me she had to stay late. I added quickly, hoping she'd confirm it, make it all feel like a misunderstanding I could laugh about in the morning. "Oh," Megan said, and then hesitated. That hesitation crushed whatever was left of my hope. "Yeah," she said she had plans tonight. "Thought she already left, though?" I didn't think anyone was still at the store. "She said she was doing inventory." Megan frowned. "That's next week. We haven't started yet. They moved it because the delivery got delayed." There it was. The moment the floor gave out beneath me, I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral, thanked her, and turned back toward my car. I didn't look back at the window. I didn't want to see if they were still standing there, or if they had moved closer, or if the lights were dimming. I got in the car and sat there with the engine running, coffee untouched on the passenger seat, my mind spinning so fast I couldn't catch a single thought for more than a second. It wasn't the act itself that got me. It was the preparation, the planning, the lying with ease that took a bigger chunk out of me than I ever expected. She hadn't slipped. She had made arrangements, looked me in the eye, kissed me, and walked out the door with that bullshit about overtime on her lips like it was just another Thursday. When she finally came home around 10, I was back in my spot on the couch, laptop open, pretending to be engrossed in a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in over an hour. She walked in, dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, and sighed like she'd just spent the night moving couches and mattresses around. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "It took forever to get through everything." I nodded, didn't say anything. "Some guy spilled coffee on one of the new rugs," she added. "Took ages to clean up. Smelled like hazelnut for hours." Still, I said nothing. "You good?" she asked, walking into the kitchen. "Yeah, just tired," I lied. She leaned against the doorway and gave me that tired smile, the one I used to think meant comfort, routine, the kind of ease people envy in long-term relationships. Now it just made me sick. I watched her pour herself a glass of wine and head upstairs without a second glance. When I heard the bathroom door close and the shower turn on, I grabbed my keys and stepped outside again, not sure where I was going, just knowing I couldn't sit there and pretend to believe the scent of hazelnut was still in the air. I didn't go far that night, just drove around the neighborhood for a while with no music playing, trying to make sense of what I'd seen and what it meant. I thought about calling someone, but then I remembered how quickly stories like this turn into advice you don't want, or pity you didn't ask for. So I parked in the back lot behind the building where Vanessa worked, sat in the dark, and waited. I wasn't even sure why I did it, only that I needed more. More than the hair tuck, more than the laugh. I needed confirmation that what I saw wasn't just some warped coincidence blowing out of proportion in my head. I stayed there until close to midnight, but by then, the store was dark and the lot empty. Either she left through another exit, or I missed them. I went home and laid next to her, staring at the ceiling while she breathed calmly like everything was fine, like the night was just another forgettable Thursday. The next day, I called in sick, told my manager I wasn't feeling well. He said to take it easy, that there was nothing urgent this week. I appreciated that, even though he had no idea he was giving me space to unravel my life. Around 5 in the evening, I went back to the store. I didn't go inside. I stayed across the street again, parked behind a row of cars, watching. A few people came and went. Nothing suspicious. Then, around 5:45, Vanessa walked out. She wasn't alone. Same guy. This time, they walked side by side to his car, a black sedan I didn't recognize. They didn't hold hands, but they might as well have, from how close they walked. She glanced around once, casually, and then laughed at something he said. Again, that same laugh. Then she reached out and touched his arm. Not a casual touch, not a friendly pat, but a slow, lingering graze as she said something to him. He smiled. Then she got in the passenger seat like it was something she'd done before, like she knew where to reach for the seatbelt, where to place her bag. I followed. It felt wrong. I've never followed anyone before, but I needed to know where they were going, how far this went. I kept 2 cars back, careful not to be obvious. They drove for about 20 minutes to a part of town we never go to together. Not shady, not too nice, just some forgettable suburb with a bunch of duplexes and houses with tired porches and old mailboxes. He pulled into a driveway. She got out. They didn't kiss, didn't touch again. But the way they moved, comfortable, routine, I knew this wasn't their first time. She went inside first. He followed, closing the door behind them. I waited. I don't know what I thought would happen. Maybe he'd come out alone. Maybe she'd leave right away. But they didn't. The lights in the living room came on, then the ones upstairs. Then it went quiet. No movement, no shadows, just stillness inside that ordinary house while my wife was in there with him. I didn't want to think about what was happening, but the longer I sat there, the harder it became to block it out. It wasn't just physical. You don't lie about your schedule, make up stories about spilled coffee, laugh like that unless you feel something. That hurt more than anything else. I left before they came out. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table for hours. I didn't drink. I didn't move. I stared at the spot where her keys usually landed, thought about the coffee that had gone cold in my car the night before, the way Megan looked at me when she hesitated. All those tiny things I had brushed off for weeks suddenly made too much sense. The new lingerie I hadn't seen on her. The shifts she picked up last minute. The new skincare products. I had 100 puzzle pieces now, and they all fit. She came home just after 10. I heard the garage door open and close. Heard her heels hit the tile. Heard her drop her bag. Hey, she called out casually, like I was just another piece of furniture in the house she walked through. Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. She poured herself a glass of wine again and leaned against the counter. How was your day? I didn't look at her. Uneventful. She nodded, sipped her wine, and then walked past me to the living room. No kiss, no hug, just a quiet walk upstairs after a few minutes of scrolling through her phone on the couch. I knew I had to confront her soon, but I needed to plan it. I wasn't going to scream, or cry, or make a mess of it. I wanted her to feel it the way I felt it, slowly, painfully, unmistakably. I needed to break the comfort of her routine. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be, and when I was, she wouldn't forget it. 2 days passed. I didn't mention anything. I didn't ask where she went or why she smelled like that same citrus and something unfamiliar when she got home. I let her believe I didn't know, that I was just being quiet because work had been stressful or I needed space. She bought it. Every time she smiled and told me about her day, I wanted to ask her how long she thought she could keep lying to my face, but instead, I nodded and listened, even when the details didn't match what she'd told me the day before. I caught her mixing up a story about a coworker who had supposedly called in sick on Thursday, but who was suddenly there on Friday when she stayed late to help. It didn't even matter if she noticed the mistake herself. By now, I knew she was just making things up as she went. I spent Saturday watching her more than talking to her. She moved through the house like she always had. She cooked, she did laundry, she even offered to rub my shoulders while I watched TV. I let her, just to see if she flinched. She didn't. That made it worse. She was good at it, this act. That's what made it sting deeper. The way she could carry on, touch me, smile, ask if I wanted to go out for dinner, all while keeping that part of her life sealed off as if it didn't overlap with mine. Let's go to the Grove, she said that evening, walking into the living room with a dress I hadn't seen her wear in months. We haven't had a night out in forever. I looked at her for a few seconds, unsure how to respond. Sure, I said eventually. Sounds good. She smiled, pleased. I'll make a reservation. As she stepped away to grab her phone, I studied the way she moved, the quick glance at herself in the mirror near the stairs, the slight adjustment she made to her hair. She didn't know that I wasn't watching her because I loved her or thought she looked beautiful in that dress. I was watching the way you'd study something before taking it apart piece by piece. I wasn't going to confront her over pasta in a restaurant or create a scene with strangers around. But I was done pretending like nothing was happening. Tonight would be the last time she saw me play along. Dinner was quiet. We sat across from each other in a booth by the window, the way we always had, but the conversation felt rehearsed. She kept asking about work, about a client I'd mentioned last week, about whether I still planned to fix the garage light. I answered everything calmly, keeping my face neutral, but I could tell she noticed something was off. She leaned in once and reached for my hand, something she hadn't done in a while, and said, "You've been a little distant lately. Everything okay?" I looked her in the eye. "Everything's fine. Just been thinking a lot." She nodded slowly, pulling her hand back. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." She didn't push. We finished dinner, split a dessert, and drove home in silence, the kind that isn't peaceful but loaded. When we got in, she kicked off her heels and went straight to the bedroom. I told her I'd be up in a bit. I needed to check something in the garage, I said. What I actually did was open the laptop I had hidden in the closet and started going through the photos I'd taken. I had parked a street over from the man's house earlier that day. I waited for them to come out again. This time they did. She wore a different coat. He wore the same stupid denim jacket. They laughed as they walked to his car again. She kissed him before getting in. A quick kiss, but a kiss. I'd captured that. I wasn't proud of myself for following them, for taking the photos, but at the same time, I didn't feel ashamed. I needed proof for myself, because even when it's right in front of you, there's always that tiny voice in your head saying maybe you're wrong, maybe you misread it, maybe there's an explanation. There wasn't. Back in the bedroom, she was brushing her teeth when I came in. She looked at me through the mirror, foam at the corners of her mouth, and said, "Thanks for dinner. It was nice to go out again." I nodded. "Yeah, it was." She rinsed and spit, then turned to face me. "Maybe we could take a weekend trip sometime. Just you and me. Like old times." "Sure," I said, stepping past her to the closet. "That might be nice." "Okay," she said softly, watching me like she was trying to figure something out. "I'll look into it." I didn't say anything else. I just got undressed, slid into bed beside her, and stared at the ceiling again. I didn't sleep much. I kept going over what I would say when the moment came. I had the photos. I had the truth. Now I just had to decide how far I was willing to take it. The next morning I didn't speak to her. I didn't even look in her direction. She made coffee, asked if I wanted any, and I didn't respond. She tried again, this time saying my name like she was testing the air between us, but I walked past her without acknowledging it. I didn't want her voice in my ears. I didn't want her casual tone infecting my head again, trying to blur the lines between what was real and what she wanted me to believe. She waited for a response for maybe a few seconds more, then mumbled something about being late and grabbed her purse. I heard the door close behind her as I sat at the kitchen table, not moving, not even blinking for a while. That was the day I decided I was going to end it, but not quietly. I had spent days watching, collecting, hurting in silence. She had spent weeks, probably months, slipping out of our life while keeping one foot in our house, in our bed, in this lie she called a marriage. I wasn't going to give her the grace of a quiet exit. If she was going to burn what we had, I was going to make sure she watched it fall apart. I took a drive to the man's house. I parked across the street and waited, same spot as before. Around noon, a delivery truck showed up. He came out wearing gym shorts and a hoodie, barefoot, looking like he had just rolled out of bed. I stepped out of my car and crossed the street without hesitation. He looked up, confused, and I could see the moment it clicked that he didn't recognize me. I stopped about 10 feet away. "You're the one," I said. "You're the guy she's been sneaking around with." He blinked, still holding the clipboard from the delivery. "What?" "Vanessa, my wife. You've been seeing her." He stared at me like I was a stranger asking for directions. Then his face changed. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He didn't have to. He looked down once, then back at me, and I could see it. Recognition, guilt, panic, all bubbling up at once. "I didn't know she was married," he said finally. "You didn't ask." "She told me she was separated." "That's not true." "I didn't know." "Save it," I interrupted. "I don't care what lies she told you. I'm not here to hear you apologize." He held the clipboard closer to his chest like he thought I was going to hit him. I didn't move. I just looked at him for a few seconds longer, then turned around and walked back to my car. I wasn't going to get into a shouting match in the middle of a quiet street. He wasn't the one who owed me anything. I just needed to see him, to confirm what I already knew, to make sure when I did what I was about to do, I wasn't relying on blurry memories through a car window. Back home, I gathered the photos I had printed, slipped them into a plain manila folder, and slid it under her pillow. I wasn't going to be there when she found it. That would be too easy for her, to cry, to apologize, to start spinning stories about confusion and mistakes and how it didn't mean anything. I didn't want to give her a chance to pretend. I wanted her to sit with it. I wanted her to see every frame of what she thought she was hiding, captured in print, undeniable, unchangeable. I turned my phone off and went out for the rest of the day. I didn't check the time. I didn't care how many hours passed. When I came back after dark, the house was quiet. She was sitting on the couch with the folder on the coffee table in front of her. She didn't look up when I walked in. I took off my shoes, hung my jacket, and sat across from her. "You followed me," she said. I didn't answer. "You took pictures of me." I stared at her. She picked up one of the prints, held it by the corner. "This is insane. This is true," I said, cutting her off. "That's what it is. It's true. You were lying. You were cheating. You made a choice, and this is what it looks like." She put the photo down. "You had no right." "I had every right. You live in my house. You sleep in my bed. You lied to my face. I have every right to know who the hell I'm sharing my life with. It's not what you think. You kissed him." She looked away. "You kissed him," I repeated, louder this time. "You've been going to his house. I know everything." "It just happened," she said finally, barely above a whisper. "No, it didn't. You don't just happen to have an affair. You planned this. You lied for this. You changed your schedule. You changed your clothes. You changed your stories. You built this. You didn't trip and fall into someone else's bed." She covered her face with both hands and stayed silent. "I want you out," I said. She looked up. "Eric, I'm not doing this with you. I don't want your explanations. I don't care what your reasons were. I want you to pack your things and get out." She didn't leave that night. She said she had nowhere to go, and I didn't care if she slept in her car, but I wasn't going to drag her out at midnight with neighbors watching. She slept in the guest room, or at least stayed in there. I didn't check. I locked the bedroom door behind me, not because I was afraid of her, but because I didn't want to wake up in the middle of the night and see her standing there, trying to talk her way out of this like she could fix it. The next morning, I woke up early and left before she could corner me in the kitchen. I drove around for a bit, ate breakfast alone, and sat in a park where I could be around other people but didn't have to talk to any of them. I thought about how long I had known. I thought about the way she had looked at me last night, how quickly she went from guilt to indignation, from caught to angry, like I was the one who had broken something. That folder on the table was still burned into my memory. I didn't even need to see it again. When I got home around noon, she was waiting in the living room. Her bags were packed near the door. She stood when I walked in. "I'll go," she said. "But we need to talk first." "No," I said. "You want to talk so you can soften the landing." "I'm not interested." "I'm not trying to soften anything," she said. "I just think we owe it to ourselves to have one honest conversation." We had one. "You cheated. I found out. You lied. What else is there?" "It didn't start the way you think," she said. "I wasn't looking for anything. He was just someone I talked to. And it turned into something else." "I don't care how it started," I said. "I care that you didn't stop it." She stepped closer but stopped when I didn't move. I felt alone, Eric. For months. You were always quiet, always in your head. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. And instead of talking to me, you found someone else, I said. Don't turn this into a story about how I failed you. You had choices. I'm not blaming you, she said. But I'm trying to explain. I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked you to leave. She looked down, then nodded. You'll hear from my lawyer. I nodded back. I already contacted mine. Her voice shook a little when she said, I never wanted it to end like this. People like you never do, I said. You just want to have both lives without losing either. She didn't respond to that. She picked up her bags, opened the door, and stood there for a second like she was waiting for me to say something else. I didn't. She walked out without looking back. After the door shut, I stood there for a while. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel rage. It was like someone had turned the volume down on everything. I walked to the kitchen, cleaned up the coffee she'd made, put away the mug, and sat at the table with my head in my hands. I had imagined this moment 100 times, and none of those versions matched what it felt like. It wasn't explosive or cathartic. It was quiet and hollow. She was gone. That should have been enough. Later that evening, she texted me. Vanessa, I left the key on the counter. I'll send my new address when I have one. I stared at the message for a while before deleting it. I didn't reply. There was nothing else I needed to say. That night, I didn't lock the bedroom door. I didn't need to. I went to sleep alone, and this time, I knew that's how it would be from now on. No more pretending. No more guessing. Just silence, the real kind. 2 weeks went by without a single word from her. I didn't call, didn't ask where she went, didn't check if she had followed through on that lawyer nonsense. The silence felt real now, not like avoidance or tension, just the absence of noise. The house felt different, not quieter, but stiller, like it was waiting to be something else. I worked during the day, ate when I was hungry, and kept everything in its place. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her toothbrush was gone. I opened the closet once out of habit and saw all the extra space, and then I closed it again without touching anything. The nights were the hardest. It wasn't about missing her. It was about reprocessing everything from the start. How easily she looked me in the eye while living a separate life. How quickly she tried to rewrite the story once she was caught. I kept going over our last conversation in the living room. How prepared she seemed. How she tried to look calm, even though I could see she was unraveling. On the 15th day since she left, I got a letter from her attorney. Nothing aggressive, just confirmation that she'd filed and a copy of the paperwork. I read every page slowly. She didn't fight for the house. She didn't ask for anything unreasonable. It was clean, simple, efficient, like her when she wanted something to end on her terms. I signed where I had to, made a copy for my records, and dropped it off with my own lawyer that afternoon. When I came back home, I sat in the driveway for a while, looking at the front door, thinking about how many times I had waited there while she came home late or left early with some excuse that sounded believable. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel proud. I just felt like I was finally done playing catch-up. Later that night, she called me. I didn't recognize the number at first. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Eric, she said. It's me. I figured. I won't take long. I just wanted to say something before it all becomes paperwork. Go ahead. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't handle any of it right. I know that. I've been thinking about how I should have told you when it started to feel wrong, when I felt like we weren't close anymore. We weren't close because you were pulling away. You weren't distant because of something I did. You were distant because you had already made up your mind and just didn't tell me. I didn't mean for it to happen that way. You had plenty of chances to stop. You didn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I just wanted you to hear me say I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, I believe you're sorry, but I don't think you're sorry for me. I think you're sorry for how it turned out. That's different. Maybe, but I still regret it. I don't care anymore. That's what matters. There was a pause on her end. I'll be out of town for a while. My sister said I can stay with her. I'm going to take some time and figure out what the next step looks like. Do whatever you need. I really did love you, Eric. I hope you know that. I didn't answer. I'll let you go, she said. Good night. Goodbye. I ended the call and set the phone down. I didn't feel anything sharp, no fresh wave of emotion. Just the finality of it. The real ending. I had thought for a long time that I'd want to scream at her, throw things, ask questions she couldn't answer. But the truth was simpler than that. She did what she did. She walked out when it was convenient. She looked back once just to say she didn't mean it like that. And now it was done. In the days that followed, I started adjusting. I moved things around in the house. Got rid of the last few items that reminded me of her routines, her favorite mug, the blanket she always used on the couch. I donated them without much thought. I started making small changes to the place. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make it feel like mine again. I saw friends I hadn't talked to in months. I went to dinner with my brother. I didn't tell anyone the full story. Not yet. I didn't want to hear their opinions. I didn't want sympathy or advice. I just wanted to live in the quiet for a while, knowing that whatever came next, at least it would be honest.